looks right, throws a deep pass, right side, end zone, it's caught, it's a touchdown. And the Cardinals continue to pour it on.
Welcome to Cardinals Underground.
I know on the service, guys, as we start here on Cardinals Underground, right? Darren Urban, Odegard, Paul Calvisi, Paulie Podcast might seem to have an agenda off the top when I cite numbers and say, you know what, the numbers really aren't that meaningful, Kyle Odegard. When you look at the fact that the Cardinals defense last year, as I get right into it, finished last in total defense, and I think they were 28th in scoring defense, but none other than Patrick Peterson is bullish on this Cardinals defense. So can I somehow, some way state that maybe occasionally we need to detach the numbers from the conclusions? And you don't, and if anything, if you disagree, then you know what? You can call up Patrick Peterson and talk to Pat P., who is extremely confident in a defense that he says on paper is among the best he's ever played with.
The reason I like numbers is when they can foretell what's coming, and seeing how different the roster is now compared to last season, I'm completely with you. I don't know if it's going to be a bad defense, a good defense, somewhere in between. We'll find out, but I agree. Last year is last year. There's a lot of new faces, a lot of guys that could be better than they were a season ago. So I'm right there with you. Let's get optimistic, Paul.
I'm totally thrown at this point. I mean, I might actually have to ask for a take two off the top of Cardinals Underground right now. I'm not exactly sure how to proceed when Kyle is actually on board and agreeing with yours truly. But the reason I throw that out, Darren, is not only those numbers, but, for example, there was a stat going into the Rams game, the end of the season, where the Cardinals had allowed a passer rating. Here it is, the passer rating. And this is a key metric. A lot of people who know defense look at the opposing quarterback passer rating, and going into that Rams finale, it was 110. And that was the worst allowed by an NFL defense since the Saints in 2010. Think about that. But the defense we saw in December was not the same defense that we had seen the previous 3 months. And so with that in mind, that's why there's always a method to the madness. Why I dismiss a lot of those numbers on defense from the first 3 months. Is that valid?
Well, the first thing I think of, quite frankly, Paul, is the fact that you're kind of getting on Kyle to agree with you when in reality have come over to his side. Kyle's always saying a lot of these numbers aren't predictive, and now you're agreeing with it. But anyways, look, I think, especially with his defense, I think it's the same kind of story as when we talk about strength of schedule, where you can talk about strength of schedule going into a year because it's based on last year's records, and so many things change with so many teams, including the one you play for or talk about, that a lot of times it's not a good representation of what you're about to see. It's not predictive. And I think there's just been so many changes at key places on this defense that it's not – I mean, they're going to be wearing Cardinal helmets and Cardinals uniforms, but it's not the same defense. I mean, you're talking about a defensive line that in a lot of ways has been completely overhauled. You're talking about a linebacker core that's been overhauled and was missing too many pieces last year. You're talking about a cornerback situation that hasn't been overhauled, but has brought back all these pieces. Robert Alford didn't play all year, and Patrick Peterson wasn't Patrick Peterson because the suspension just jacked his season all up. And even in the secondary where you had Jalen Thompson all season, he's got a year under his belt. So I think because of all those things, that's why it's not predictive, because I think what you're putting on the field in a lot of ways is completely different than what you were trying to play with up until December. And I agree with that notion that the defense in December was different than the defense that played most of the year.
Yeah, and I think, Kyle, maybe the national types who don't follow the Cardinals, they're going to look at the numbers, but you can't look at those numbers when you can't attach the same names to those numbers. To Darren's point about the D-line, here's your flip card from the Rams game, right? The finale.
Well, why do you got that?
I had this over here in the corner. I grabbed it because alongside Corey Peters and Chandler Jones were the following names: Zach Kerr, Karan Reed, Michael Dogby, Miles Brown, Bonterius Dora. Now, some of those are young guys, and they're going to be on the roster this year. But when you add a Jordan Phillips, for example, and you add the 2 fourth-round draft picks, and and you had a Devon Kennard on the other side, and Hassan Reddick is switching positions. Yeah, there's so many different names that all of a sudden you can't really apply a lot of the numbers.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the big issue with the defense last year, I mean, you had Patrick Peterson, Buda Baker, and Chandler Jones, and all those guys are Pro Bowl level talents, but there was just a serious lack of depth in certain positions, inside linebacker beyond Jordan Hicks, like you said, the defensive line, cornerback. So I think it was very much like stars and not scrubs, but reserves at least. And that was the issue last season. And I think there's more depth this year. There's more starting caliber players, and it has to play out because we don't know what Jordan Phillips is going to look like in this defense, or Devon Kennard, or Devondre Campbell, or Isaiah Simmons. But the fact that these guys have proven to be starting level talents in the NFL is obviously a good thing for the defense, and why it could make a sustainable leap, a sizable leap, if the pieces come together.
Kyle, if I ask you about consistency, just getting back to a consistent defense that you can count on, not unlike the Bruce Arians years under Todd Bowles and James Betcher, do you think we can at least, pencil that in this year? Because you just saw a lot of ups and downs from the Cardinals defense from week to week a year ago.
I mean, I still would hesitate to say we're going to see that because I just feel like we don't know. I mean, the big things to me are the pass rush and the coverage in the secondary. And I think you can make a case for why the pass rush is going to be better and why it wouldn't be. And I think you can make a case for why the cornerbacks are going to be better and why they wouldn't be. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it looks, but there's some very good passing games in the NFL that you're going to have to try to stop. And I feel like the Cardinals have to prove it defensively that they can do that consistently.
Which position group on defense, which unit on defense are you most confident in right now, Darren, considering all the change at all three levels in some ways? Not as much the secondary, but at least the front seven especially. Which unit you're most confident in right now?
That's an interesting question because I agree with Kyle. You can easily make an argument basically over the place that there are things that have to be proven. I think, and this might be more of an issue of process of elimination rather than overall true confidence in knowing exactly what you're going to get. But I'm going to go with cornerback because I do think Patrick Peterson's season was an outlier because of his suspension. I do think Robert Alford has a chance to be a solid player and who was trending that way before he got hurt. And I do think Byron Murphy will be helped by the fact he played. Now, I'm not guaranteeing any of that. And I agree with Kyle again. I think there are question marks that still need to be answered there. But when I look everywhere else, whether it's the defensive line or the linebackers or the safeties, I see more proving that needs to be done that kind of leads me back to cornerback.
I'm going to go inside linebacker. And I don't say that lightly because think of where they were 2 years ago at that position. But if you're telling me Jordan Hicks, and I think we all have a lot of respect for his football IQ, and you saw it a year ago. There's no doubt he was the brains of that defense, and he set guys. I mean, God forbid what the Cardinals would have looked like if he would have gone down, knock on wood. He played every single snap last year and started all 16 games. And so you get Jordan Hicks with 150 tackles, but you're taking a lot of the coverage responsibilities off his plate with a Devondre Campbell and an Isaiah Simmons. And then you get that sort of athleticism next to him. It does make me think of the whole Carlos Dansby, Darrell Washington dynamic they had going once upon a time. And so it's kind of hopeful, maybe a little more hope than confidence. But I look at that inside linebacker spot, and I'm really bullish on that combination this year.
Yeah, that's the group that I had written down as well. I think the inside linebackers is the strength, and I'm not sure that's ideal because from a positional scarcity standpoint, you'd rather have your strongest units be the edge rushers and the cornerbacks. But I do think having good inside linebackers can help you defensively, especially like you said, if those guys can cover. We saw the issues covering tight ends last season. So I think it's nice to have that stability on the inside, and especially if those guys can come up with interceptions and make those type of plays, maybe rush the passer in Isaiah Simmons' case. But I do think from a depth and high-end talent standpoint, inside linebacker is the strongest group.
And, I can see, Darren, where you would make a case for corner, but to Kyle's statement earlier, there's also a lot of evidence that we should be a little wary of what's coming at corner, right? Robert Alford, who the Falcons let go 2 years ago, whether it was because of the ankle injury he was dealing with at the time or not, missed an entire season. 30-year-old guy. Patrick Peterson turning 30. Now, he really looked like Patrick Peterson in December. Byron Murphy, some of the analytics are not kind to Byron Murphy's rookie year, although he got stuck on the outside in an island quite a bit, and he seems to be much better equipped to be a slot corner. To me, the biggest question mark would be that cornerback spot. There is the possibility they could be lockdown guys, and Vance Joseph can run the defense he wants to run and dial up the other 9 with his 2 corners out on an island. But I also can see a scenario where they might have to make a few adjustments there by the end of training camp based on what they see.
I'm not going to argue. I think you can easily find things to talk about. I mean, even when you guys were talking about inside linebacker, I mean, the Falcons let Devondre Campbell go, and, so what issues might be there? Isaiah Simmons has proven nothing. So I think there are questions there. But when you talk about cornerback, I can't argue with that. I mean, for me, if I talked about the one place, the one unit that has the most to prove or that you have some most question marks, I don't, with all due respect to the analysis of those cornerbacks, which I see where you're coming from, I don't know how it could be anything but the defensive line, which struggled mightily last year. And while they did try and make some upgrades, the biggest upgrade they made on the defensive line, which was Jordan Phillips, there are still questions over whether that's a one-off type of year he had or if he can continue to trend upward. Now, they're betting that he's going to trend upward. Vance Joseph knows him, feels they will continue to trend upward, and I'm not saying he's not going to. But when you're talking about a defensive line that, aside from Corey Peters, you've got Jordan Phillips and then Zach Allen, who barely played as a rookie, and then 2 other rookies that you took that you figure that's going to be in your rotation. I mean, that's a lot of ifs that I feel like for whatever questions you might have, for instance, of the cornerbacks, at least they've done it on this level.
If I said unit most confidence in, and you have Chandler Jones at 19 sacks last year, Kyle, just the presence of Chandler Jones, doesn't that elevate the edge rushers? Now, you added Devon Kennard, and there might be a time sign perhaps somewhere along the way at that position maybe, but just Chandler Jones being the premier pass rusher in the league from the edge right now, couldn't you argue, man, that just elevates them, just one guy in that room?
I mean, you clearly have a lot of confidence in Chandler and know he's going to be great, but you have to look at both sides, and Devon Kennard, he's been a solid starting outside linebacker, but I don't think he's near one of those elite edge rusher type things. So I think there's still questions about the other side of the pass rush, and whether it's Devon Kennard or Hassan Reddick or Isaiah Simmons, I think somebody needs to step up in order to consider that type of group of strength.
Darren, do you think he sees less attention this year just because of those names, plus Jordan Phillips? Or is Chandler Jones going to get as much attention from opposing offensive coordinators and O-lines as he ever has?
This isn't – you're going to want those other guys to beat you. I mean, if you're scheming an offense and you're trying to figure out who you're going to stop or protect yourself from or avoid or whatever you want to say, Chandler Jones is going to get the most attention in terms of the blockers. And assuming he plays like he was at the end of last season, you're going to avoid Patrick Peterson if you can, or you're going to, again, like Patrick Peterson said, you're going to run the receiver he's covering through 8,000 picks and traffic to try and lose him. Those are still the guys you're trying to avoid, with all due respect to everybody else. I mean, even if Devon Kennard has a career year, you're still going to worry about Chandler Jones in week 15. You're not going to all of a sudden say, well, Devon Kennard, he's the guy. Because if Devon Kennard goes off, it's probably because they're putting more attention on Chandler Jones. And so I don't think the guy got 19 sacks last year. Chandler Jones is going to get everybody's attention, and he's going to have to fight through that. And we're going to have to see what kind of impact that makes. And hopefully, even if it drags some of his actual statistics down, it opens some things up for other people.
And that's sort of the conundrum of that position, edge rusher. We could say, okay, you have the most confidence because of Chandler Jones, But then the most approved would be whoever's opposite Chandler Jones. So you could almost check both boxes with that same answer. How about you, Kyle? If I said which unit has the most approved, where would you go?
I agree with Darren. I think defensive line is the group that has a lot to prove. And like he said, Phillips had a very good season last year, but it was one season, and he's got to stack that. And then a lot of the rest of the guys, have some potential, but there's not a Calais Campbell within this group. There's not somebody that's this anchor that's consistently going to get after the quarterback that's proven it. And they think Phillips is going to be that guy. And if he is, I think that's going to help the defense tremendously. But as it currently stands, to me, the defensive line is where we're going to look and see, can they get that consistent push on passing downs, and can they stop the run adequately?
Where else, Darren? You're going to be in the preseason and you're making your list and you're checking it twice. Where else on defense are you going to be keeping an extra eye on, a little extra attention just to see what it looks like?
Well, I mean, depth across the board. I mean, I want to know who they're going to use as that third safety. I do think Jalen Thompson's got a chance to have a pretty nice year, given some of the strides he's made in his second year as the safety besides Budda Baker. But I want to see what kind of depth they have there. And I want to see some of the rookies. I mean, we've touched on them kind of in passing a few times already, but their number one draft pick was Isaiah Simmons. And because of Devondre Campbell, we're not going to sit here and say, well, he's automatically going to start at inside linebacker. We're not exactly sure. Again, losing out on this on-field work in the offseason cost Vance Joseph a chance to see what kind of things Isaiah Simmons could do up close and personal. It cost us a chance to see where they might put him or where they might move him around. So I'm super curious to know what they do with this kid who has got all the talent in the world and has got a chance to be a dynamic kind of force on the defense, depending on how you use them.
I have a lot of respect, more so than ever. Every year I do this, of making that jump from college game to the NFL game and having an instant impact, and just how tough that is. Yet I've had a number of players tell me, oh, no, Isaiah Simmons is playing, Paulie Pencilneck. He's playing. They're going to find the snaps. They're going to find a role for him. He's going to be darn near an every down player. I don't quite buy that yet, especially when you've had a condensed offseason and you haven't had the chance to really fully indoctrinate yourself to the pro game. But what do you think, Kyle? I mean, is he going to be so dynamic? There's a reason he has the nickname Unicorn. With that in mind, are we going to see him on the field as a darn near an every down player, you think?
I'd be surprised, especially early on. I think one of his deficiencies in college was holding up against the run in the box. And if you're going against a run-heavy team like the Niners, I mean, I understand shadowing George Kittle and doing that, but in a base defense where you feel like they're going to run the ball, I think Devondre Campbell and Jordan Hicks is the ideal setup compared to him. I think at this point, Isaiah Simmons makes a ton of sense in sub packages, in dime and nickel. But base defense, I'm not quite sure if he's ready. And if he is, they'll see that in training camp. I mean, he could be that much of a freak that they just say, we're not taking this dude off the field because he just makes plays. You saw the Tyrann Mathieu factor in a way where some guys are just ball hawks and you want them out there, even if you give up a little bit of run defense because he can punch the ball out or strip the ball like a Peanut Tillman or something. I mean, if he's that type of instinctive player, then maybe it gets to that point. But with the lost offseason, I just feel like early on he's going to be in a timeshare, and then maybe that'll grow.
All right, name a player other than Isaiah Simmons, who we know has all the skill set and he has the accolades, but name a player on defense. We did this on offense here on Cardinals Underground who will surprise this year, Darren. A guy who fans say, wow, okay, I didn't see him or that coming.
Well, I already kind of tipped my hand, but I'm going Jalen Thompson. Here's a kid they took in the supplemental draft last year, and he kind of was under the radar because, hey, he didn't have an offseason last year, so he knows what it's like. And he ended up being a starter by the time the season was over. And I thought he had some moments where he really flashed well. And I think he's smart. I think he's athletic. And I think he fits a lot of what they're trying to do. So I think he's got a chance to be good. Now, the Isaiah Simmons thing could change some of the factors with like playing time with some of these guys. Like in certain packages, is it Jalen Thompson who loses snaps to Isaiah Simmons because of however they want to organize the defense? You just never know how that might go. But I do think Jalen Thompson has a chance to make some strides going forward as the safety with Budda Baker.
What do you think, Kyle? A player who's poised to surprise this year?
Well, to be honest, I was going to take Jalen too, but I keep copying you guys, so I'll go a different way. I'll go Byron Murphy. I think he's the type of guy who, to me, he was playing out of position last year. He was learning a lot as a rookie. He was still a raw player. I mean, I think he's kind of this ball of clay that wasn't a finished product, and it showed. You mentioned analytically he was targeted a lot. He gave up a lot of passes last season, but I don't think it was the right role for him. I think playing nickelback is going to help him a lot, where he's more in traffic. He's just a natural ball hawk. I think he's very natural catching the ball. If he gets his hands close to one, like we saw with his interception, he's going to come down with it. He was a all-state receiver in high school. So I think as the game slows down for him, I think he's going to become a more instinctual player, and with the more talent around him, I think that's going to help, where he's not going to be on an island as much. I think like Byron Murphy is a guy that could take a leap this season.
And a quick note about Byron Murphy that gets lost because we don't talk about it and it feels a little bit moot, but he basically played 2 years at Washington. I believe he redshirted that first year, and he came out after 3 years in college. So he only had 2 years of college football under his belt. And would that third year have made a huge difference? Who knows? But you go from only playing actual experience of 2 seasons, and then you ramp up to playing over 1,000 snaps at a position that maybe you're not best suited for. I think Byron Murphy should be allowed to have an adjustment period. And so I see where Kyle's coming from, and I could see that absolutely happening.
No, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. As Budda Baker will tell you, and you don't have to ask him, that Washington's secondary has been loaded the last 5 years. That defense has been loaded. So, yeah, it was tough getting some snaps, and then he was playing out of position to a large part, at least the beginning, especially of his rookie year in the NFL. I'll buy that. Speaking of rookies, I really want to go with Leki Fotu. Man, I want to go with a 6'5", 340-pound guy who's going to come in there with the athleticism.
At fullback? Is that what you're saying? You want to go with him at fullback?
The jumbo package, goal line. I look forward to watching him run in with the offense. So when it's first and goal from the one, absolutely, I look forward to that. But that's such an unknown. It's risky. I'm going to go with the guy who actually saw with my own eyes, and that was Robert Alford. And by the end of camp, before he suffered the fractured leg, I mean, he was balling every single practice. He was a dog at corner. He was making life miserable for receivers.
Demir Bird.
Yes, Demir Bird. Him. That was just an automatic. It was just when during this practice are the two of those guys going to skirmish? That was an automatic. I'm almost sad Demir Bird isn't here this year because that actually was something to look forward to during the dog days of camp. When would that break out again? But Robert Alford, a guy who's poised to surprise, if he can be what he was in camp last year, and Pat P's back to being the P2 effect, right? Then look out. That to me brings us to Vance Joseph, Kyle. And I think Vance Joseph, if you listen, especially guys in the secondary, had a bit of an epiphany the end of last year, simplified some of the coverages, and less was definitely more on that Cardinals defense in December. And I think Vance Joseph, now equipped with 2 guys who are capable of covering the tight end, he's ready to scheme it up more than ever going into year 2 as defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and we touched on this last year, but he was kind of coaching with one hand tied behind his back for much of the season because of all the personnel losses, either in training camp or during the season. So it's a lot. It'll be a lot better indicator of his coaching ability this year, where he's got a lot more talent. He's got the superstars that he wants. I mean, there's things to work with in 2020, and we'll see how creative he gets. We'll see if there is a simpler philosophy on the back end, if that matters. But I think, like you guys mentioned, the fact that Jalen Thompson has come on, if those cornerbacks do play well, like we're forecasting, then the secondary should be really good. So it's a lot to ask, but if you get to that point and you feel good about your defensive backs, that opens up a ton for Vance Joseph, where he can get creative with the front 7 when it comes to exotic blitz schemes.
What do you think, Darren? When I say Vance Joseph, what do you think about going from year 1 to year 2? And And how much different schematically do you think the Cardinals defense might look?
I don't know if it's going to look tremendously different schematically. I just think that Vance Joseph, assuming Patrick Peterson and Robert Alford are healthy and able to do the things that they're counting on, I just think he's going to be able to do more of what he wanted to do in the first place, which was, again, put those guys out on an island and do some more things with the other 9 guys. I mean, I think they were so short at cornerback, especially early in the season. I think that impacted his thought process on a lot of stuff. Just overall helping raise the level of the personnel, I think is going to give him more options. And we haven't even talked about having a chess piece like Isaiah Simmons where you could use him in a lot of different places. I mean, we joke about Cliff Kingsbury having all these chances because of the COVID to be sitting at home and dreaming up some different stuff and watching different ways. I mean, I would hope and think that Vance Joseph might be doing the same things once he found out that he got Isaiah Simmons. Hey, maybe I should reach out. Maybe I should look at some different kinds of defenses, reach out to different kinds of people that I know that might have worked with a piece like this and get more creative than I thought I was going to be able to be because I didn't have that piece. So, look, Vance Joseph went through a tough year last year. It's part of the gig. But we all know that he got a lot of heat from the fan base, a lot of frustration from the fan base. As we said at the top, this defense did not play well last year. So there's a lot on the line for Vance Joseph to make those strides going forward. And again, we know that the personnel is better. He's got to make sure that it works on the field.
Now, I'm going to apologize to PETA because I have a tiny spider that's sitting here right above the camera. Oh, and he just sensed him.
That's excellent.
I think I got him.
I think that's.
I can't get the mouse in the back patio here during quarantine life. I still have the mouse trap out there. 3 nights in a row, it's consumed the shredded cheese and the peanut butter I put out there and has not triggered the trap.
You sure it's not the punk going out and getting a snack?
You know what? I need to add that to his to his list of duties around here at Casa Calvisi. I'll say that much. I mean, if only the punk was as versatile as Isaiah Simmons. Which we got to talk about that real quick because I've talked to a couple people on the Cardinals coaching staff, and they would love to use him the way Clemson used him. But I don't see that happening. I think that's a lot of conjecture. And
not this year.
I mean, you're not going to see him at slot corner. Right? I mean, I know he runs a 4-3-8, but you're not going to see him in some of the roles in which Clemson used him, 5 different positions at more than 100 snaps per. He can't be that versatile in the NFL, can he, Kyle?
I would be surprised if he played slot corner. He's got the 40 speed for it, but when you're that tall, I mean, I think we saw it with Hakeem Butler. It's harder to break down and move laterally when you're a taller person. I mean, if you're 5'9", 5'10", it's easier to go with these guys with the quick twitch, sudden movements. So I think and we'll see. I've never seen him in real life, but I think the straight line speed is probably superior to his movement skills horizontally. And if he can do it, I mean, the dude's going to be a superstar in the NFL. If you can rush the passer off the edge and play slot corner, I mean, I can't think of anybody that has that legit skill set. So we'll see when he gets here, but I would pump the brakes on that idea.
See, that's why I have trouble covering Calvisi in the slot because I'm too tall and he's got that lower to the ground gravity, the quick twitch.
That's right. Hashtag Tyrann Matthew. You're right. That's how that works, Ryan. All I know is players know players. And when you hear a guy like Chandler Jones in the offseason on his own in the media session bring up that he went and watched Isaiah Simmons' film, and his quote loosely was, you got to draft a guy like that. When players watch another player, and especially a college kid's film, and they make a comment about that, it does make my mind have these visions of grandeur and exactly what they're going to be able to do. To me, we'll know that Isaiah Simmons has fulfilled his rookie expectations when the opposing offense breaks the huddle and the quarterback immediately goes, where's that Simmons cat? Where is he? When he becomes that sort of X factor, and I'll spare you my nickname at this point, when he becomes that guy that the opposing quarterback identifies, that's when we'll know that he's fulfilled the role that I think the Cardinals coaches envisioned for him? Or is that too much of a stratospheric expectation in year one, Darren?
I think it might be a little bit of a leap for year one. I mean, I know we've talked about before with like Adrian Wilson. He used to be that guy, but Adrian Wilson wasn't that guy when he was a rookie. He wasn't. I don't even know if he was that guy until he was in year 4 or 5. So I think, look, a number 1 draft pick, he's got a lot of expectations. I don't know if it's fair to say if he doesn't come in and look like a Pro Bowler Swiss Army knife, like we've talked about right away, that means he can't get there. We're in a very immediate analysis type of society where we're all going to talk about it and we're all going to expect it. And if he doesn't have some kind of giant rookie season, I'm sure there'll be some conversations about why not, and if he should have, and did they make a mistake type things. But I do think that Isaiah Simmons is going to need some time to adjust to this level. I think the NFL and these coaches are going to need some time to adjust to him and how it's going to fit. Just like we talked about Kyler Murray. You know, Kyler Murray talked about when he was speaking to the media for his one time in the offseason, he was talking about when he was watching film, there were things that, you know, he knew, but he just wasn't seeing, if that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like Isaiah Simmons could very well go through that. It doesn't mean he's not going to get it. It doesn't mean he doesn't necessarily know it or he's not football savvy enough. But when you get to the NFL level, it's a different game. And so I think that is why we all need to have a little bit of patience of where Isaiah Simmons might be year 1 to where he might be in year 4.
All right, so big picture for the Big Red D, Kyle. I know when we talked offense and what's a realistic expectation, you said if they're not top 10 in a lot of categories, you'd be disappointed. What do you think for a Cardinals defense that finished near the bottom of most of the rankings, but is radically different when you look at the names on the roster?
I think clearly expectations should be lower for the defense based on what they did last year. I get that they improved in a lot of areas, and you do have some Pro Bowl players leading the way still. So I think the ceiling is decently high. It's higher than a team that usually finishes last in total defense and among the worst in points allowed. But I think if you finish middle of the pack this season, that's a nice little leap up from a year ago. I think a lot of it is dependent on your stars. I mean, Patrick Peterson, like we said, was up and down last season, and he's going to be 30. And Chandler Jones was unbelievable last season. And can you duplicate that? It's easy to say, hey, he had 19 sacks last season, so he's going to get there or exceed. But if you look historically, you have a career year. A career year means that's the best season of your entire career. So it's not easy to duplicate that. And if Chandler Jones and Patrick Peterson take a step back, we can talk a lot about these other guys, but those are the two hinges to me, is two elite guys at elite positions. So I think if Chandler Jones and Patrick Peterson play well, then this defense can turn it around. If not, there could be issues.
What do you think? Big picture, Darren? Are you on board with that?
I would tend to agree with pretty much everything Kyle said. And further than that, if it becomes true, as Kyle has said in the past about like the offense becoming a top 10 offense and those kinds of things, all you need to win a decent amount of games, I think, is to have a middle of the pack defense. It needs to be opportunistic. It's going to need to generate a few turnovers. But I think in terms of the statistics, I mean, you don't need something to shut down. You don't need the 2,000 Ravens, not with what the offense could be. So I think being mindful of that, I think a realistic jump into the middle of the pack is possible with this personnel. And I also agree with Kyle, a lot hinges on your best players. Look, you go as your best players go. And their best players remain Patrick Peterson and Chandler Jones, not just because of the players they are, but the positions they play.
What you need is the scoring defense the Cardinals had in December. They went from allowing 29 points a game to 22 points a game or so, about a touchdown better per game in your scoring defense in December than the rest of the season. If you can just pick up where you left off there for the most part, then you're going to be in every single game, you would think, theoretically. And by the way, as we wrap this up, I was just informed in my ear that we did an entire podcast about the Cardinals defense without mentioning defense against the tight end. So we defied all expectations, and I guess it's mandated. We do have to mention defense against the tight end. Well, honestly, we should have started and ended there based on the fact there were 17 receiving touchdowns in 16 games against the Cardinals defense. But the reason we didn't is because now you have Devondre Campbell and Isaiah Simmons, so you just hope that those guys will actually fulfill those expectations of making the defense against the tight end a non-story.
We'll keep our fingers crossed, Paul.
That's right. So we'll see. We officially ended on a ... We'll see next time on Cardinals Underground.